Give me exactly 3 seconds and ask yourself one question. The thing that caused you the most pain in your hardest fall 5 years ago, are you currently using those same old methods to solve similar problems today? Don't rush to answer. Most of us already have the answer in our heads. We just don't want to admit it. Falling into the same pit, stumbling a second time is called bad luck, a third time is a choice. But stumbling countless times means you have never learned how to review your past. So, what psychological barrier causes even the smartest people to deceive themselves? And how can one break free from that loop of failure? Watch until the final seconds of this video to find the answer that will unlock your potential. And if you find this topic interesting, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the Fact Teller channel to give us more motivation to continue producing meaningful content. The concept of reviewing, or in other words, reflecting and evaluating, is certainly something you have heard of and maybe even applied, but I can firmly assure you that, very likely, you have never done it right even once. Because a profound and true review is an action that requires you to actively fight against your own brain's instincts. It will make you uncomfortable, make you uneasy, and make you just want to escape. And precisely because it is hard, the number of people who do it right is extremely small. But for those who do it right, the trajectory of their destiny will turn in a completely different direction compared to the majority. What does it mean to do it right? Which step is the hardest? And why is it that the smarter someone is, the easier it is for them to deceive themselves in this matter? Since childhood, we have been taught that experience is precious, practice makes perfect, and suffering a loss makes you remember longer. But if you observe the people around you closely, you will discover a cruel truth. What most people call experience is actually just repeating the exact same sequence of actions countless times. A person driving for 10 years does not mean he understands driving strategy better than someone who has only driven for 3 years. It is highly likely he just used what he learned in the first year to drive for the remaining 9 years. A person working in business or sales for 8 years whose performance still sluggishly sits at the average level, his 8 years of experience might very well just be 1 year of experience reused 8 times. Psychologist Anders Ericsson, when studying experts, made a key discovery. Mere repetition does not bring progress. Only deliberate practice can break through capacity bottlenecks. And the core of deliberate practice is a deep review after every action. Experiences that are not accompanied by a review are merely an accumulation of time. No matter how long you immerse yourself in it, your level of cognitive awareness will not automatically rise. In his youth, Zheng Guofan had a hot temper, offended half the bureaucracy, and was almost squeezed out of the center of power. But he had a habit he persisted in for decades, which was writing a diary every day. It wasn't about keeping an accounting ledger, but rather dragging out every wrong word spoken, every mistaken judgment, and every character flaw revealed that day, to examine them repeatedly. The ruthlessness with which he scolded himself in his diary was more venomous than any enemy. Thanks precisely to this self-dissection day after day, month after month, he honed himself from a fool of average aptitude into a great figure capable of shouldering the heaviest responsibilities of the late Qing dynasty. Experience itself is not valuable. Only meticulously examined experience is truly priceless. If a person merely goes through something without ever stopping, without ever dissecting the chain of judgments, emotional fluctuations, and logic behind their own choices in that event, then that experience is like an undigested meal, swallowed into the stomach but absorbing zero nutrient. So why can't most people accomplish this step? The problem lies in a place that very few people even realize. The biggest obstacle to self-review is not a lack of time nor a lack of methods, but rather your brain will desperately prevent you from seeing the truth. It sounds exaggerated, but from a neuroscience perspective, this is entirely well-founded. The human brain has an extremely powerful self-protection mechanism. In psychology, it is called cognitive dissonance reduction. Put simply, when you make a wrong decision, your brain won't obediently tell you afterward that you messed up. It will automatically fabricate a story to make you feel that actually things aren't that bad or that it wasn't your fault. For example, you impulsively buy a stock that plummets uncontrollably. Afterward, you very rarely admit, my judgment was completely wrong at that time. The brain will tend to tell you that the overall market is bad, everyone is losing money, or that in the long run, it will inevitably go back up anyway. Or, for instance, when reviewing a failed partnership, your first reaction is almost certainly that the business partner was untrustworthy, not asking, what systemic error did I make in the selection process? Professor Francesca Gino of Harvard Business School once conducted an experiment asking participants to recall their past faulty decisions. The results showed that over 70% of people, when reminiscing, would unconsciously embellish their own roles, downplay their responsibilities, and exaggerate the impact of external factors. Looking broadly at reality, this rule holds true in all fields, from personal life to business. From my perspective as someone who frequently works in the environment of media content creation and brand building, this rationalization happens every single day. When an advertising campaign fails or a video fails to attract attention, the most familiar reaction is always to blame changing algorithms, terrible audience taste, or insufficient budget. Very few people are willing to sit down and retrace every step of the campaign to admit that their script's message was too boring or the design imagery completely misaligned with the target audience. According to statistics from a global startup data analytics organization, over 40% of new projects collapse simply because they create things the market doesn't need at all. But sadly, instead of reviewing the flaws in their research phase, the leaders believe they failed because they ran out of capital too fast. This proves that while you think you are reviewing the problem, in reality, you are just comforting yourself with a sophisticated facade. This is exactly the hardest part of the review process. It requires you to proactively tear away the protective membrane your brain has already woven and directly confront the ego that makes you extremely uncomfortable. This process will generate fierce psychological resistance because admitting mistakes will trigger the brain's threat warning system. The amygdala will release emergency signals almost identical to when you face physical danger. To the brain, admitting I misjudged and the feeling of tension when a tiger is lurking right in front of you belong to the exact same type of reaction. Therefore, the instinct of the vast majority of people when facing failure is to escape, blame external circumstances, and quickly turn the page. Meanwhile, those who can deeply review themselves are essentially fighting a brutal battle against their own survival instincts every single time. So, what methods do the people who truly reap massive benefits from reviews use to bypass this instinctual defense line? Observing the masters who continuously advance, you will see that their review is not a vague reflection, but a very clear dissecting sequence consisting of 3 continuous steps. The first step is called reconstructing the scene. When most people look back at an event, only a general result appears in their heads. This is ruined, or this went okay. But the action of the masters is to pull out the entire decision-making chain and slow it down frame by frame. What information did I have at that time? What information was missed? At which bottleneck did I make the key judgment? What was the rationale behind that judgment? At what exact moment did emotion intervene in the decision? The founder of Bridgewater Associates, Ray Dalio, once mentioned in his book Principles that he required his team to keep a decision journal after every investment decision. Reviewing is not about looking at whether the result was right or wrong, but seeing if the reasoning process was logical at the moment the decision was made. Because results can sometimes be very deceptive. A bad decision might accidentally make money, and a good decision can also lose money due to bad luck. If you only look at the results, you will never be able to distinguish between competence and luck. The next step is extracting the pattern. After reconstructing the scene, the key move is to extract patterns that can be applied to other situations from this specific event. For example, you discover that you conceded too quickly in 3 consecutive negotiations. After reconstructing the scene, you realize that every single time the moment the other party showed impatience, you panicked. So the pattern here is that you have an overly sensitive reaction to the negative emotions of others. This will cause you to consistently be at a disadvantage in any context that requires a tug of war. Once you extract this pattern, its value is not limited to negotiation but encompasses communicating with your boss, bargaining with partners, or even resolving family conflicts. And the final step is modifying the plan. After finding the pattern, you must conclude with an actionable behavioral adjustment. It shouldn't be empty reminders like, I must stay calm next time, but rather something as specific as, next time when the other party shows impatience, I will stay silent for 15 seconds, take a sip of water, and only then restate my request. The Japanese god of management, Kazuo Inamori, did one thing every night. He would pull out the half-baked decisions of the day and write down how he would handle them at that specific bottleneck if he could do it over again. He persistently carried out this practice for over 50 years. The quality of a review never depends on how long you think, but on whether your dissection is detailed enough, whether the pattern extracted is accurate enough, and whether the behavioral modification is specific enough. But achieving this is still just progression at an individual level. The practice of reviewing, if placed in a more long-term dimension of time and space, will create a much more profound and widespread effect. The power of reviewing is almost invisible in the short term. Do a deep review today, and tomorrow you won't magically become smarter, nor will your income immediately skyrocket. This is also why most people give up, as the feedback loop is too long to see immediate benefits. But if you stretch the ruler out to 10 years, the gap between the person who persistently reviews and the one who never does is so vast that they seem like 2 entirely different species. The reason lies in the compound interest effect. Every effective review is an instance where you are fine-tuning your internal decision-making model. You can imagine a human being as a machine that continuously makes choices, having to make hundreds of large and small judgments every day. Reviewing is exactly the fine-tuning of your parameters after each of those judgments. The degree of adjustment each time is very small. It might only optimize by a fraction of a percent. But the decision-making process is an accumulation of several hundred times a day, tens of thousands of times a year. Charlie Munger has a very rustic saying, every night before you go to sleep, just be a little bit smarter than when you woke up in the morning. Day by day, that is enough. That little bit smarter relies entirely on reviewing. Jeff Bezos once promoted a culture called Postmortem review internally at Amazon. After every project ends, whether it succeeds or fails, the whole team must sit down and conduct a deep, structured review. He once stated of you, in the long run, the quality of decision-making is a company's only true competitive moat. And the quality of decision-making can only be improved through systematic reflection on past decisions. The exact same principle applies to individuals. By the time they reach 40 or 50 years old, there are people who, when facing complex situations, can quickly see through to the essence and make high-quality judgments. It's not because they were born with good intuition, but because they have spent 20 years through countless self-reviews honing their judgment models to become extremely sophisticated. Meanwhile, some other people reaching the same age, when facing a new problem, still only know how to close their eyes and take a blind gamble based on emotion. If their gamble pays off, they think themselves brilliant. If it fails, they blame bad luck. That 20-year gap is actually stretched out during the most ordinary of evenings. One person spends 20 minutes honestly scrutinizing their judgments of the day, the other scrolls through short videos for 20 minutes and then rolls over to sleep. The branching point of destiny often begins silently like that. There is an old saying, no man ever steps in the same river twice. But the reality is, most people spend their entire lives drowning in the same river over and over again. Deeply reviewing oneself from a certain perspective provides a person with the ability to live their life over again. You have no way to go back to the past to change what has already happened. But through reviewing, you can turn everything from the past into fuel for the future. Every single failure, after being deeply dissected, is no longer merely a loss. It transforms into a new calibration point in your decision-making system. With every single success, only after an honest review can you distinguish what is true capability and what is just blind luck. Only then will you know, next time, what should be replicated and what to be wary of. A person who lives for 40 years, if he never reviews, only possesses 40 years of experience. A person who lives for 40 years, if he deeply reviews himself every day, possesses 40 years of wisdom that has been purified countless times. The former is raw ore, the latter is refined metal. This difference in density is the most silent, yet also the most brutal, divergence between people. In short, true maturity only begins the moment you dare to step out of your mental comfort zone, stop making excuses for your mistakes, and bravely face your own weak hidden corners. To apply this lesson in practice, you don't need to do anything overly grand. Try to set aside 10 minutes every night to reflect on one decision from the day, asking yourself where you went wrong and how you will fix it tomorrow. Doing this consistently, the compound interest power of self-awareness will turn you into a significantly sharper and wiser version of yourself. Do you have the habit of reflecting on your daily decisions before going to bed, or does your brain also frequently seek to blame the circumstances to feel relieved? Leave a comment to share your perspective or personal experience right below so that we can all discuss and learn together. And finally, if you feel the past few minutes truly brought value, please take a second to hit the subscribe button to support the Fact Teller channel. That is the greatest source of motivation, helping us continue to deliver even higher quality content. Thank you so much, and see you next time.